The Soviet Constitution of 1966, Article 4. Military service in the Red Army is an honorable duty of all Soviet citizens. The Soviet military is a force for revolutionary change around the world. As such, citizens must aid the Red Army in whichever way they are able. Article 5. The Red Army's sole goal is to defend the revolution against reaction and spread socialism on Earth. The Grand Marshal may exercise his authority to overrule the civilian government if it is beneficial to this goal. Article 6. All Soviet citizens have the right to participate in government. Red Army soldiers and veterans possess a higher right to serve as government officials and may be elected as they have proven themselves as revolutionaries who are willing to fight to protect socialism. Soldiers who serve as government officials continue in the struggle to protect the revolution. Okay, so we got a new event, split decisions. I'm not gonna read it all. It's basically Tukhachevsky speaking with Ustinov, who is our quote-unquote economic minister. And there's a report about the current economic conditions of Western Russia, essentially. And he has two proposals within the report. One is to restart the pre-war economic policy, which is the new economic policy, the NEP. Or the other course is to begin forced collectivization. Now, this is pretty much what happens when you go down the road to freedom. Now, we finished this part of the tree with the reforming of the Presidium and the military, and the reorganization, and then the discipline union and all that. Right now we're gonna deal with the Southern Urals, which is going to be a bit of a problem all of its own. You'll see why in a little bit. So essentially, this is a pretty important. There goes Romania. This is essentially a pretty important. Do we have anything to do? What? Oh no. This is essentially a pretty important decision because we have on one side the foray into the unknown, which is the collectivization, the forced industrialization. We're going to read through the effects in a little bit. Or the return to the revolution. Now, it's one of the main plot points of TNO is that instead of Stalin taking over the Soviet Union, we have Bukharin. And Bukharin, in real life, supported Stalin because Stalin, at the beginning, supported his economic policy, which was the new economic policy, which is a kind of market socialism, quote-unquote, although it's not really even proper to call it socialism because it's a complex matter. Let's not get into it. But essentially the whole ordeal was to try to facilitate material development by allowing small-scale capitalism and using essentially state planning for major industries, which later down the line gets adopted into a lot of different political economies. But Bukharin was pretty much one of the first people to go ahead and come out with this. However, Bukharin had a revolutionary sort of idea behind this, which was that essentially it didn't really matter if a small, tiny capitalism of small farmers or whatever existed among the wider revolutionary state, because the state could control that small capitalism and prevent it from becoming too exploitative. It's a complex matter. Let's not get into 20s Soviet debates because we're never gonna hear the end of it. And that's the return to the revolution. So in this case, the real life example to follow for the Soviets is not the 5-year plan. It would still be a 5-year plan or if not a 5-year plan, it would still be a planned economy, just not in the same way that we are used to in real life. Now, why am I saying that Stalin initially supported the NEP when we know that later on he did the 5-year plans, which was pretty much a much more command economy than the NEP? Because in the end, Stalin is funny and just kind of flip-flopped. Essentially, in the early days of this debate, it was Trotsky who supported a more aggressive industrialization with less space for sort of organic capital accumulation, which would result in, you know, material benefit for the Soviet people and all that. It's complex. It doesn't end up being that way, and Stalin does it. And so for us, going into collectivization would be doing the new thing. Now, which of these to follow? So the return to the revolution... I don't know. The return to the revolution costs 150 million USD. The collectivization costs 200 million. Not really that big of a deal, considering our current debt. It's not too high. $50 million more isn't really not that much. This increases GDP by a small amount. This increases GDP by a small amount. This gives us 4 military factories and 2 civilian. This gives us 2 military and 2 civilian, and a lot more building slots. I really don't know. I really don't know, in terms of the game, which is gonna be the better. To me, it kind of seems like it would probably be the return to the revolution, but knowing what right now we are doing, I think a little bit of collectivization and state planning could be a decent fit for Tukhachevsky. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm not sure if this is the good idea according to the game, but in fact, I'm like 75% certain that it's not the good idea. Also, it would probably be a better, like in this current Russian situation in real life, it would probably be a better idea to do the NEP, but I don't know. Also, it provides a nice sort of, there's a nice also parallel, because what essentially Tukhachevsky was doing throughout the operations that we were doing was the policy of war communism, which we saw in episode 1, episode 2. His whole shtick is that, war communism was also good at, being a disciplined, and forging a disciplined state and all that. So, war communism in real life is what happens during the Russian Civil War. The NEP slash forced collective, or slash industrialization at breakneck pace debate is something that happens after essentially war communism becomes impractical and the Civil War is winding down, so that also makes sense. Anyway, lessons from Bukharin. That sounds pretty good. Let's draw lessons from good old Mikhail. Good old comrade Mikhail. So we must improve the infrastructure of the Soviet Union, of course. Now, the foray to the unknown is supposed to give us the event reappropriation, but that seems bugged. Awesome! Another thing that's going on... Oh, there we go. Oskar Pichtinovich Pichtin. The past 5 minutes happenings are just caught up with Oskar and his sleep-addled thoughts. Now that he found himself face-to-face with the officer announcing his fate, what else could a simple farmer do but nod? By order of the Grand Marshal, continued the military man, your farm has been reappropriated for the Revolutionary War effort. The words he read on the paper on his hands sounded distant, almost disinterested. The Red Army will supervise its conversion into a productive kolkhoz, which is a collective farm. Коллективное хозяйство. You've been instructed to join your new brigade in the nearby village. He motioned at the gunmen amassed by the lorry, who began advancing towards Oskar's house. Wait! The soldiers froze, giving Oskar tense stares as they leveled their guns at the ostrich man. He gulped. My belongings, at least, said the farmer pausingly. The officer glanced to his fellows, back to Oskar. Shrugging, he barked. Ruslan, Grigory, help our kulak friend over here pack his bags. So obviously, in case somehow you're viewing this and you don't know, kulaks are essentially like semi-rich slash rich peasants, essentially those who own their land, and sometimes also those who, depending on whether or not the definition of kulak has been expanded in your current in your current usage of the word, they may also be those peasants who can afford to hire essentially farmhands. I believe that's the correct term in English, who are peasants with no land that just like sell their work at an owner's farm. Anyway, several more minutes later, the new kolkhoznik were escorted from the late father's farm with nothing but the clothes on his knapsack and a rickety balalaika. Well, that's basically what's going on. We are turning a few farms into collectivized farms. Now, that's not what Trotsky, in fact, was advocating for, but that's more of a Stalin kind of thing. Most famous is the whole Holodomor stuff, but well. Another thing that we're doing, as you can see, is exerting influence in the Urals. Now, there's a slight problem with that. There is a slight problem with that. Also, I should have probably brought my Air Force over before all of this. Oh well, stuff happens. So, essentially, the whole problem is there is the whole Urals. There is the whole Urals mechanic where you can increase your influence to the different Ural states and all that, which is fun and dandy. However, there is a slight issue, which is the fact that you also have other people. You also have other people trying to increase their influence in the Urals. The other Russian states, in fact, the West Siberian state, can do that. And while we were winning the influence race in ORENBURG, we were losing it in the Ural League. So I thought, well, if the whole shtick is that to get them peacefully, I need to, if to get ORENBURG peacefully, I need to lose the Ural League, might as well get both of them by force. And so we just did the declaration of war. And obviously that means that the Ural military district gets to declare war themselves. On the southern Ural statelets. So hopefully this is a race. This is literally a race to capitulate our two eastern neighbors, southeastern neighbors. And it shouldn't be all that difficult. We have a head start. We have a head start on the Batovites. And if we take Magnitogorsk and Sibai, that should be over. Right? So, we get a step forward. Bukharin's economic legacy is mixed to say the least. His economic plans did little to prepare the Union for war against Germany. We were unable to provide the arms and ammunition necessary to fight back against the Nazis. This is exactly the most shameful part of his economic legacy, but it wasn't exactly a failure. For too long, this failure on the military and heavy industry front obscured the success in other areas. Under Bukharin, agricultural output increased, for example, and more significantly, the Union made tremendous strides in terms of light consumer industry. Not the industry that could kill Nazis, but the industries that provided the people of the republics with wood, clothing, and canned foods. This turned the Soviet Union from an agrarian backwater into a nation that was industrialized, albeit at a lower level. Everything we do for the defeat of Germany and the liberation of Everything we do is for the defeat of Germany and the liberation of Russia, but we must recognize that an industrialized nation is not entirely devoted to the production of weapons of war. Okay, yeah, let's continue the civilian industry programs. Nice. Efforts on all fronts will bring us to Berlin. So, I guess we're gonna avoid the real-life Soviet mistakes, which was to focus too much on the heavy industry. Nice. And that should be the end of the Ural traders. Yo, are you dead? No, good. You are very dead. And that brings the Ural campaign to a close. Very nice. That's the end of that. We have new factories, and all is good. Now, next up, we're going to, of course, integrate everyone, but we're gonna look towards the reunification of Western Siberia. Now, it looks like this is gonna happen with a war, because I don't see any peaceful reunification talks in these options. But it's gonna be after January 1969, so that's gonna be a while from now, to say the least. And yeah, in the meantime, I'm just going to be finishing up the economic focus tree.